Welcome to the Hospital Finance Podcast, your go-to source for information and insights that can help you protect and enhance revenue at your hospital. And now, the host of the Hospital Finance Podcast, Michael Passanante.
Hi, this is Mike Passanante, and welcome back to the Hospital Finance Podcast. We're very glad you could be with us. Today I'm joined by Sam Wares. Sam is the Vice President of Settlements at the Managed Care Advisory Group. And today Sam is going to talk with us about revenue recovery opportunities from class action settlements. Welcome, Sam.
Thanks a lot, Mike. Happy to be here.
Sam, let's jump right in. Can you give us some background on class action settlements?
Yeah, absolutely. There's many class action settlements that are available on an annual basis. In fact, there's often billions of dollars available annually from class action settlement funds where businesses and healthcare organizations are entities who are eligible to participate and collect money from these settlements. What happens is there's lawsuits that will result in a class action settlement. They commonly center on price fixing of certain products or allegations of inadequate compensation for services. We'll touch on some specific examples of settlement types later on in today's cast. Settlements are agreed to in order to avoid a court trial, as many listeners may know, so that each party makes a compromise or settles. And what will happen is the defendant or group of defendants forfeit a large sum of cash, oftentimes tens of millions, hundreds of millions, or even billions of dollars for an individual settlement in exchange for releases from class members. The class members are the entities who are eligible to participate in these settlements. And they'll get releases from these class members and or waive certain rights. So for example, whatever the alleged action was, such as under reimbursements for a specific type of medical claim for a certain period of time, the defendants will set aside a pool of cash in return for being released of any litigation related to that issue in the future. What many entities are not aware of is that even if they do not participate in the settlement by way of submitting a claim in hopes of receiving some cash compensation from that settlement fund, they're still surrendering these rights because they're actually part of the eligible class that could submit a claim. In addition, automatic payment from a settlement is very rare for those where a business or a healthcare organization is a class member. So for these types of settlements, a claim must be submitted in order to receive any sort of compensation.
Sam, are hospitals and other healthcare providers often eligible to join these settlements?
Yes, hospitals and healthcare providers are oftentimes eligible class members, potentially even more frequently than any other type of business. Reason for that is there are several types of settlements that apply only to healthcare providers. Those are ones where an insurance payer was alleged to have underpaid or inappropriately or inadequately reimbursed their providers for a specific period of time for certain types of claims. Again, those are only going to be specific to healthcare providers. And then the other types of settlements will cover potential price fixing of products that really any type of business would have, including a hospital or healthcare provider, whether it be components of their patient beds or other office equipment such as a computer or office furniture that any business would have, and certainly type of equipment that can be found in a healthcare setting.
Can you describe the typical options of class members?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good question. A class member basically has three options when they're notified of a class action settlement. First, a class member can do nothing. They don't submit a claim, meaning that no monetary compensation or cash will be received from the settlement. The next option would be that they can submit a claim on their own. Some do this. However, of those that do submit claims on their own, few do it while maximizing their ROI or return on investment, if you want to look at it this way, where the amount of time that they spend on a claim submission may not be as fruitful as it could be if they used an expert in the field to assist with that submission. And that's the third option, which would be that a class member can have a third party submit a claim on their behalf, because there are companies who offer settlement recovery services and or claim filing assistance. For most settlements, what people may not realize is that typically 80% or more of the entities who are eligible to submit a claim to a settlement do not pursue the settlement claim and therefore do not receive any sort of compensation. This will happen because many class members simply are unaware of settlements that are applicable to them. And this may sound surprising, but if you think of it from an individual consumer perspective, you probably receive these settlement notices in the mail that are for, a coupon or a rebate from an airline or maybe a cell phone company or a stock deal that went bad, something like that. And most of you, if you're like me, just throw those in the trash because they're very legal looking documents. Many times they're several pages, small fonts, they look confusing, looks like it's going to take a lot of effort, and you really aren't sure what you're going to get from that. It really is the same type of notice that a business or healthcare organization will receive for these types of settlements that we're talking about today. Another issue is that oftentimes the notice or the claim forms just aren't received by the class member at their primary or maybe at all of their locations. If you think about a settlement, many times they cover an issue that happened well in the past. So the information provided by the defendants by way of eligible class members and their addresses could contain old addresses and locations that are no longer in existence. So the notices and or the claim forms simply are not received. So the way that that's alleviated is that notices will be published in journals, or sometimes you'll see them in well-known magazines or newspapers, trying to spread the word to all the eligible class members, but it's literally impossible to ensure that every single class member is appropriately notified of any given settlement.
Okay, Sam, can you walk us through the types of settlements and in particular which ones might be available to healthcare organizations?
Yes. We focus on 4 types of settlements, all of which are available to healthcare organizations. The first I've talked about a bit thus far. We refer to as product anti-competition or antitrust. These settlements center around alleged price fixing and or inflation of specific products made by certain manufacturers. Typically come in the form of indirect purchaser settlements. Healthcare organizations will be included in these, typically under the Consumer Protection Act. That's where their arguments are made when the plaintiff's counsel is actually submitting the action. And I focus on indirect purchaser settlements. What that means is that if you're buying a computer and it's, say it's an Acer computer, for example, just a brand name that's in front of me, the settlement isn't going to be something where you had to purchase that product directly from Acer. It's assumed that you went to Best Buy or a CDW or some other retail business or even wholesale to get your products. That's what's known as an indirect purchaser settlement.
Okay.
Products that we've seen covered by these types of settlements include the materials within furniture, so the foam padding that was in the mattresses at any hospital or in any patient bed, within the waiting room furniture and chairs. Certainly any type of computer monitor, both the old technology, which was cathode ray tubes, and the new technology, which is typically LCD. Those are the products that we've seen settlements on in the past, and similar types of settlements look to be computer component based, at least in the near future. Another type of settlement is what we simply refer to as healthcare, where those are insurance claims which were allegedly underpaid or they weren't reimbursed appropriately. There's been several of these in the past. Some of them are state specific. They're all payer specific. Some of them will be nationwide for all providers. Sometimes they're in-network claims, sometimes they're out-of-network claims. The one that has been in process for many years that will be quite large, don't know when it's going to hit, it could still be several years from now, is an action pending against the Blues that's been out there for quite some time. And may touch on a couple specific examples of those types of healthcare settlements that we've worked on in the past. Third type of settlement is what we refer to as financial. These will cover a manipulation of financial markets. There's a few that are out there to the tune of several billions of dollars. It's going to take some time before there's an actual claims process available. Really what those focus on is that large banks are alleged to have manipulated certain rates that would have been used as the basis for any type of loan or funding that every business in the country had, including healthcare organizations. So there may be some sort of reimbursement there. Another big one, which is currently pending, is centered around excessive payment cards, specifically Visa and MasterCard interchange fees. So again, healthcare organizations accept credit card payments by Visa and MasterCard from their patients, and they have allegedly been overpaying too much to Visa and MasterCard to accept those types of payments. So there's a settlement that is in process for over $7 billion where there would be that large fund available to healthcare organizations to potentially get reimbursed for some of those overpayment of fees. The last is pharmaceutical. These are specific to larger organizations because what these focus on are self-insured health plans where a health system is funding their health insurance plan for all of their employees, and there's a settlement where it's alleged that there's an overpayment for drugs purchased on behalf of its employees. Typically these come in the form of a pay for delay from a known brand manufacturer of a drug where they are allegedly focusing on the generic drug maker and asking them to hold off for a couple of years on releasing their generic so that they can capitalize on that market that they've created.
So Sam, your firm helps organizations file into these class action settlements. Do you find that hospital internal legal departments are already involved in joining and settling class action suits, or is this too specific for a general counsel to get involved in?
Yes, some are. We work with over 500 hospitals of all sizes in different systems with different complexities. So the largest systems will work on these in some way, shape, or form, but it's a tough thing for them to really value because it's not what their team of attorneys are tasked to do on a day-to-day basis, especially since the return is often unknown from these settlements. So it's hard to determine whether or not they should dedicate one person to try and look out for all these settlements or put a team of people on it to make sure that they don't miss any settlement opportunities, and then take the time to submit a claim in a fashion where they're going to receive the optimal return or the maximum return from these settlements. Some settlements require specific data, historical data, to receive the most that they possibly are eligible for from that given settlement. Again, what that most is, what that amount actually turns out to be, is going to be unknown. So while some work on it, what we found is that when we engage with hospitals' internal legal departments, they almost always end up turning over the business to us because we can focus on searching 4 applicable settlement opportunities and sifting through all the notices that they may receive, which really aren't opportunities that are worth their time. And then when we do find an opportunity that is worthwhile, we can assist them in a way where they're spending the least amount of time and we are getting them the most that they can receive from that given settlement. So the short answer to that is they do work on these settlements on their own in some cases, but what we found is that working with us has been mutually the best type of situation.
Got it. Sam, I'd be interested if you could share some examples of recent settlements for our audience.
Yeah, the first settlement that's a good example is one that is healthcare based. It paid out back in 2012. It's known as the United Healthcare and Genix settlement, where it's something I've touched on by way of example, where this was an issue where underpayments were allegedly made due to use of an Genix database to pay for out-of-network claims. It was a large settlement pool. It was $350 million. The class was nationwide, so any provider who had United Healthcare out-of-network claims was eligible to submit claims. And that was one where there was a default submission method, meaning that you could, as an eligible provider, simply send in your claim form by signing your name on the dotted line and accept what the estimate was based on data provided by the defendants. That's often the case. However, what we find is that when you can submit your own data to support your claim, you will often receive much more money from that settlement. So there would have been thousands of providers that we represented who would have received next to nothing, and they actually ended up receiving thousands to tens of thousands and sometimes more from the settlement. So good representation in the value of our service, and a good example of a healthcare settlement there. Another one is Oxford, New York. That's similar to United Healthcare in that the alleged issue was dealing with underpayments. This one was due to claim coding and bundling edits. The reason why I want to bring this up in addition to United Healthcare is that this was a state-specific settlement. It was a pool of $22 million available to medical providers in the state of New York. Again, data was needed in order to receive an appropriate refund from that settlement. And the last one I want to touch on is one that falls into the product anti-competition category that we touched on earlier. It was known as the CRT indirect purchaser settlement, CRT meaning cathode ray tubes. So that was the technology found in old computer monitors, the older box tube TVs that would have been found in every single patient room within a hospital, and also in the older medical device equipment, so EKGs, ECGs, those types of monitors and vital monitors. Settlement was for $576 million, and it was available to businesses in just over 20 states. Good return from that settlement, on average tens of thousands of dollars for each of our clients. And that's also a good example because while that settlement covered about 24 states, there's also individual states that are raising those actions just for each specific state that we may see pop up in the future. The reason why a whole group of states will be included in what is called multi-district litigation, whereas others won't, is based on the authority that the individual state's attorney general has set in place by way of the protection offered under the Consumer Protection Act that we touched on earlier. So those are three good examples. What we see on the horizon as far as the most immediate opportunities coming up are those similar to that CRT settlement where they're product-based settlements.
Got it. Sam, it was great chatting with you today. Where can people go to learn more about your firm and upcoming settlement opportunities?
Sure. We have a website specific to our settlement service and upcoming and current settlement opportunities. It is settlements.mcaginc.com. So that's settlements.mcaginc.com. And you should be able to find all the information you'd ever want on settlements there.
That's great. Thanks again, Sam. Good talking to you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it.
If you have a topic that you'd like us to discuss on the Hospital Finance Podcast, or if you'd like to be a guest, drop us a line at update@bessler.com.
This concludes today's episode of the Hospital Finance Podcast. For show notes and additional resources to help you protect and enhance revenue at your hospital, visit bessler.com/podcasts. The Hospital Finance Podcast is a production of Bessler Consulting.